Welcome back to a new session. Today's discussion will be all around how to write APIs. I'll just give you a brief introduction about before I go towards API. So far, we have been discussing about many machine learning models, like we discussed about logistic regression and linear regression, and then we discussed about decision tree. In all these models, we did a common thing. The common thing was reading from a file. Maybe we had a .csv file and then we pre-processed it, okay, and then we trained a model on the pre-processed data. Of course, we had to go through those pipelines and all, and then we trained a model, and then we use that model for prediction. But do you expect that we'll always get a file from CSV? I mean, why would the customer give you a CSV file? Of course, the data will be encrypted and it will be stored in some kind of a DB or some kind of a server which cannot be accessed by anyone, right? Maybe it's available only within his own network. So in order to achieve this, we will need to understand how the machine learning app is made, okay, and how to make our models be deployed on the client server. Say for example, today you're working on your PC, okay, this is your client, this is your PC or your developer PC. So your model is sitting in your PC, but the customer cannot use your model if it is sitting in your computer. You'll have to host this in some kind of a cloud, maybe, or on-premise server. Only then the customer can interact with these models and get his predictions made. Okay. In order to do that, what we'll be doing is we just to understand what the whole cycle is like, we will have a server. The server can be imagined as, sorry about that. Yeah, the server can be imagined as a cloud server or maybe actual server, dedicated server that is sitting in one of the company. Okay, we as a developer will be developing our code in our local PCs, and we'll be pushing that code to Git, maybe Git or any other tool which can help us keep a track about all the codes that we are writing. And this from the Git, it'll get deployed in maybe a server or maybe a virtual system anywhere. Okay, and now our code is sitting here. Let us say all the artifacts that we require for the code, it is sitting here. Now what happens is, now the customer comes, or let us say that he is a customer, and he would send a request to server that I want to train your model on the data that I have. So we can also have, let us say, a DB here. Now this is our database. Now this database will stand as an input to our server. Now what will happen is the our code will fetch the data from this server and it will get trained. So we need some kind of an application which can do all this. We will have to facilitate the user to interact with our application, also give a possibility to read from a database. It can be a database or it can be a S3 bucket or it can be anything, I'm just talking out loud for so that you can have some feel about where I'm going. Okay, in today's session, what we'll be doing is we will be looking at how to write an API, how this interaction happens from the customer to the server. Some cases it can be an API, in some cases it can be a job. When I say job, it is scheduled. Like every day 9 o'clock, my application is gonna run automatically. It is gonna repeat the same activity. Like if you know some part of like visual basics in Excel, it is like on a trigger of a button, it is gonna do the same activity that you have written in the code. It'll it'll complete that whole activity and it'll come finally give the report ready. Okay, so in today's session we will cover a bit about APIs. So let me start off with an empty folder and then I'll show you. Now let us say I create one empty folder. Now in my D drive I have something called as knowledge. I'm going to create a new folder here called ML app. Okay, this folder is empty. As you can see, I don't have anything. Now what I'll do is I'll go to my Visual Studio and I'll open that folder. Open folder. Go to my D drive. I have a knowledge. Then I go and check ML app. Now this is empty. The first things that what we need to do is enable Git here because I want to push my code to Git, right? So what I'll do is I'll just go to my terminal, click on new terminal. Git is already installed on my PC. So if it is not installed, probably you'll have to install it. So I'll just go and say git init. So it has already initialized a repository here and it says that it is ready. Now what I'll do is I will create one virtual environment where I can put all my libraries stored there. Why we have to do this is because the Python which is installed in your computer will be there only for you. It is not available for the application. And if you want all the environment specific to your application, then you have to create one environment. So how do you create in Python is Python -m venv. You can create anything like .app. Say for example, because I'm talking about a machine learning app, I would say .app. And when I create it, you can notice that there is a new folder that has been created and all the libraries related to Python will be stored here. And it'll take some time. Once it is done, then probably you can see that now it is done. Now, once you have done this, what we will have to do is we will have to activate the environment. So .app, you can say scripts and activate. Okay, now it is activated. Now you can see the change, right? When it is activated, you see the .app and the prefix of that terminal. Now if I go and create, let us say, I create one Python file here. Sorry, I create one Python file here. New file. I'll name it as main.py. Okay, this is my Python file which is sitting in that app folder. Now, if I say I want to import pandas as PD, okay, I did not do anything. I'm just importing pandas, and if I run it, it will say that library is not installed. But actually, pandas is available in my PC. But in this particular uh, new virtual environment, it is just Python. We did not install any of the libraries. So what we'll do is we will uh, go and we'll go and deploy our necessary modules. Say, for example, if you want to install the pandas, you can just say pip install pandas, and it'll automatically download pandas and it'll store it in your .app virtual environment. Okay, now let us finish that. It's gonna take a little while. Stay on with me. So whichever libraries that is required for your application, right, you will have to do a pip install, and you can keep a track about what all applications that you have in your virtual environment. So you can use something like pip freeze and export it to a .txt file, and that can be helpful in deploying those libraries in your virtual cloud. So for example, now pandas is installed. That is how you don't see that underscore anywhere now. Okay, now if I want to export my libraries that I installed here, I can do this pip freeze followed by dot requirements. Okay, I'm just exporting it to dot requirements. So when I do that, it will create a requirements.txt file and it will tell me what all libraries that I have installed. So Python, we have installed pandas, but pandas also require some dependent libraries like NumPy, 6, tz-data, and all of these. So that is why it is getting installed automatically, even if I don't specify it. Okay, now we are not here to discuss about pandas. We are here to discuss about API. So there is a library called Fast API, uh, which will be helpful in writing all the API documents. Say, for example, if I want to go and install Fast API, I can just go to Google. Say, for example, I want to look for Fast API, Python. Okay, now this is the document. Uh, if you want to just give a brief about this. You can just go through it. I want to find out pip install fast API. So it will give you the command. So this is fast API. I'm going to copy it and I'll paste it in my terminal. Pip install fast API. Now it will install all the dependents that is required for fast API. And once that is there, then we can start writing our APIs. Okay, now that is already completed. Now what I'll do is I have main. Now let me just remove this pandas. In the main, if I want to create a API, I'll do from fast API import fast API. Okay, and I will say I'll generate an app. App is equal to fast API. I'll call that function. And in order to write APIs, the first thing what we will be doing is we will be creating a decorator. Now, I'll use decorator like app dot get method. I want to write a get method, and my endpoint for get method would be the default root. Okay, and then I will say read underscore root. I will not pass any arguments to it, and then simply say return dictionary here. I will say hello world, and I can also write some message. Let me write it in this way. I'll say message is hello world, and I also want to write one more key. The app is running fine. Okay, now this is just a get method which I'm writing, so I can say this as status. Okay, the status app is running fine. Now this is how you write an API. This is a get method. When I say get method, it probably in this case it is not accepting any inputs, but it is able to tell you that the application is up and running. So how do you make this application run now? It is not running as of now. Okay, so if you want to run this application, I just cleared my terminal. In the terminal, you can say fast API development, and I'll call my main function main.py. Now what it'll do is it'll try to check. So one of the library is missing. It says pip install fast standard. So I'll just copy that and let me install that fast standard also. Okay, it has installed the required library now. What we'll do is we'll try to run it one more time. We'll try to run the application one more time. Just hang on a bit. Okay, let me clear the terminal and then I'll say fast API dev main.py. Right, once you run it, you'll get to see something like this, wherein it says that the application is running at this particular web page 8000, and if you want to look at the documents, you can use the docs. Now what I'll do is I'll just click on control and use one more click on the I'll hold the control key and I'll click on this particular URL, and it'll take me to the web page. Now it says that the app is running on this 8000 port, and I get what I have given in that message. So in the code I have written, right, return message hello world, and the status the app is running fine. The same thing, hello world, the app is running fine. Okay, now you can imagine how you can use this. Say for example, I want to write one more API. Let's say @app dot post, and I'll say add numbers. Okay, I'll say def add numbers, return some message. Okay, let us say same thing. I'll copy it for now. But of course, we will say we will also need to give the answer to it, right? So I can say instead of status, I can say the answer is, and then here I'll try to put the answer. So just hang on. Let me use something like this. ANS. Okay, I did not declare ANS, so don't worry about it. ANS is here is equal to 1 plus 1 for now. But I want the request to be taken from the user, from where the request is coming. Say, for example, from the web page, I will be entering the numbers and I'll sending it to the backend. So our code should be able to take those values inside, process it, and return it back. Okay. So what I'll do is I will, in order to create that as an input, we use something called as a payload. Okay. Now payload is nothing but a JSON file. It can also be like the input can be anything. It can be an image, it can be an Excel file, it can be a Word text file, anything. So in this case, what we'll do is for simplicity, we'll take a JSON file. Now, what should be the structure of my JSON? I have to tell to the customer because he cannot tell. I mean, he cannot send anything that he wishes for. In order to make our API work, we need to send. We need to have some kind of a proper payload. Now, in order to prepare that payload, Fast API has got something called as like Fast API uses something called as pydantic. Okay, now let us say from pydantic import base model. Okay, and then I will tell class payload. I will inherit the properties from base model and then say number one is integer and number two is integer. For now, like no, I'm talking out very loudly. I'm just taking two arguments, number one and number two, and I'm specifying that both of them should be integers. Okay. And then what I'll do is I will use that in my add numbers. Now what I'll do is payload. This will have payload class. I'm specifying that I'm going to get a payload as an input, and this payload will have the structure which I defined in this particular class. Okay. Now what I have to do, I simply have to add two numbers. So number one is equal to payload number one, and number two will be payload dot number two. And in the case of answer, what I'm going to do is number one plus number two. As simple as that. Okay. Before I proceed, I'll just show you. It has done some changes. It is going to restart your application automatically when you save the main.py file. Okay. When you do a get method, you can play around from the web page. Okay. Now, for example, if I go and look for docs, it is gonna show me what all APIs I have. So I have a read route and I have a post method also. One get method and one post method. This is the new API that we have written. Now it says it requires some request body. And if I'm not sure if I can edit from here. Yeah. All right. I'm not sure if this is possible from here or not, but I'll try to open a Postman. Now this is one application which you can use for making all the API calls. Like even if it is on your computer or if it is from outside also, you can use this Postman. Okay. Say for example, I'll open my Postman. I'll open my Postman and I'll say, uh, okay, I have this, but you can see my endpoint. Say, for example, if I do a get, and on my endpoint, when I go and hit the API, I get some response. One minute. Okay, I get the response. See, I just go and trigger the API, send, and I get the response. The app is running fine. Now, instead of doing a get, I'm going to do a post. And in post, I'm going to add numbers. Now, what is my endpoint here in the code? Add. This endpoint is add, right? So you will have to use add. And remember the payload that we have to send? It has to be in like this, number one as an integer and number two as an integer. So here it will be number one. Let us say I use 5, and number 2, let us say I use 6. Okay, and you will have to use body. In body you have to click raw. In raw you have to choose JSON. Once you do all this, then you can go and hit send, and it is going to tell you the answer. So you can imagine that I can send any kind of information from the front end, maybe from a computer or from the customer's terminal, and use that information in my backend, process it, and send it back. So you can see that the answer now we are getting is 11. But wait, now we are not here to do the simple task. I don't want you people to make a model like this. It has to be more generic. Okay, so when you start writing APIs, make sure that you follow some folder structure. Now for instance, I use this base model. Okay, sorry, if I use this something called as payload, which is going to be used for my add numbers. But imagine if you have like hundreds of APIs, you cannot keep all of them here, right? It'll only confuse, and your code will look very not clear. It is for a new person who's looking at your code, he should be comfortable enough to understand what you have written. So what we'll do is we'll create one new folder. Like, let us say I will say it is as utils, and under utils I'm going to create a new file. Under utils I'm going to create a new file like common.py. Okay, now whatever code that you have written in the main, like for the payload, I can just cut it out, put it in my common. Of course you will have to download the base, so I'll cut that also, go back to my common, I'll paste it here, base model. Okay, this is done. Now the payload is not accessible, right? It'll throw an error for you. So what we'll have to do is from utils dot common import payload. Now this is the class which you have written, and then you'll not have any errors. So you make sure that all your imports are happening in one direction. Don't try to complicate it. Now I have written one new file under utils, and in utils I have something called as common. In common I'm going to store all my validations. Now this payload is nothing but my validation. Now why I'm saying validation is, like, let us say if I don't pass number 2, instead of number 2 I pass number 3 and send it. What happens is it's gonna tell you in a brief way. You do not write any code for validation, right? But fast API has an advantage, and it tell you, boss, you're missing something. It requires number 2, but number 2 is not found in your payload. So that's an advantage if you use fast APIs. Now let me cancel it. I'll put this number 2 again. I'm going to send it. It's going to work. Now the API is working fine. The answer is 11. You can try it one more time. Maybe you can put 10, send it, and the answer is 16. Fine. One more thing, which before I take a break on this, the function which you wrote here, add numbers, should also be not like this. You should have some other file here. Now let us say I'll create one more file. I'll say it as operations.py. Now here I'm going to write def add numbers. Okay, and you know already the wildcards. I'm going to use the wildcards here, and I'm going to return some args. Okay, I'm expecting that this will take only the integers. I'm not going to tell you all that try except and all. Maybe you can write. I mean, those are the good practices for you to write a program. So I hope that you are already familiar with that. So I'm just going to mark a comment here. Accepts integers or floats and returns sum. Okay. Now I have written this function add numbers. It is sitting in operations.py. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, wherever we have add numbers, I'm going to change this function name. I'm going to say add numbers because they are both same. I cannot have a conflict. Add numbers API. And here, instead of adding them directly, I'm going to call my function. I did not call my function, so it is from utils dot operations import add numbers. Okay, and here I'm going to use add numbers. Add numbers and payload dot number 1 comma payload dot number 2. This I can make a value like val equal to, and then I'll here have a val. Always keep in mind, whenever you start off an application, this is going to be the skeleton. Any API that you write, you're going to put it in main. But any functionality that you write, based on the type of the functionality, you will have to create multiple packages within this package. I mean, within this like ML app is a package, right? Complete app. So in that, you will have to create multiple folders and make sure that you write the code in a segregated way. So all operations should go under this. All common things should go in this. Maybe tomorrow we can come up with something called as model, wherein I can have my machine learning models getting trained here. Maybe I can have some other folder like config, wherein I can tell that the config is going to store all my connection details of a given server. Like, let us say if I want to connect to my SQL server. Okay, if I want to connect it, I can just write code around this code around connecting the connecting to SQL server in this config. I'm going to tell you in the next session about how to create machine learning app. Say for example, we know how to train the decision tree model now, right? So we'll use the same code, we'll try to segregate it, and then we will make the one complete app ready. And the way we pass the arguments here, number 1 and number 2, we are going to send maybe some train from the DB or train from a CSV file, some kind of an arguments, and based on that we'll try to choose whether we have to take the data from the DB or we have to take the data from a CSV file. We are going to look at all that. Okay, for now we are good. I think in this session we looked at how to write APIs and how to create folder structures and how to make imports. So just make sure that this is gonna be the main file wherein you store all your APIs, and this will import all the necessary functions that you'll have to. Of course, you can also use, say for example, in model, I can write a file which can import from utils. That is also possible. So based on the need, we'll try to make the imports, but I'll try to cover that in the next session. For now, we are good. Thank you.